Professor Verthelax had been testing young minds for 400 years. He was a Centauri, a species known across the galaxy for their great intelligence. His body was tall and thin, made of something that looked like living crystal. Light moved through him when he thought deeply about something. The more complex the thought, the brighter he glowed. He worked at the Galactic Academy, the most famous school in all of known space. Children from hundreds of different planets came here to be tested. If they passed, they could study alongside the brightest minds in the universe. Most did not pass. The tests were very, very hard. Today was a normal day. Verthelax had already tested 3 children that morning. A young Krixvoll drone had done well on the mathematics portion. A Verkith child had shown promise in philosophical reasoning. These were expected results from expected species, but his next appointment was unusual. A human child. Verthelax looked at the file on his screen. The child's name was Ellie Chen. She was 7 years old by Earth counting. Her mother was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her father designed games for entertainment. They lived on Consortium Hub 7, a massive space station where many species worked together. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only joined the consortium 12 years ago. Before that, they had been alone on their small blue planet, not knowing that thousands of civilizations existed among the stars. Most species thought of humans as slow learners. Their children were born helpless. They could not walk or feed themselves for a long time after birth. Their brains took many years to fully develop. Compared to Centauri children, who could solve basic equations within days of hatching, humans seemed almost primitive. Verthelax did not think badly of humans. He simply understood their limitations. He expected this test to be short. He would give the child some simple puzzles. She would struggle. He would write a kind report suggesting she return in 5 or 6 years when her brain was more developed. Everyone would go home satisfied. The door to the testing chamber opened. A small human girl walked in. She had black hair cut short and dark eyes that seemed too large for her face. She wore a simple blue dress and shoes that lit up when she walked. In her arms, she carried a stuffed toy that looked like a small earth animal with long ears. "Hello," she said. Her voice was high and clear. "Are you the teacher?" "My mom said I have to do puzzles today." "I am Professor Verthelax," he replied, speaking slowly so she could understand. "And yes, we will do some puzzles. Please, sit down." Ellie climbed onto the chair across from him. Her feet did not reach the floor. She swung them back and forth while looking around the room with obvious curiosity. "What is that creature you are holding?" Verthelax asked. He believed in making children comfortable before testing. "This is Mr. Whiskers," Ellie said, holding up the toy. "He is a rabbit. He's my best friend. He helps me think." Verthelax made a note. Humans often formed emotional attachments to objects. It was considered a sign of their need for social connection. He found it somewhat charming in a simple way. "Very well. Mr. Whiskers may stay. Are you ready to begin?" Ellie nodded. Her eyes were bright with excitement, not fear. This surprised Verthelax slightly. Most children were nervous before the academy tests. He activated the first puzzle. The air in front of Ellie filled with floating shapes. They were 3-dimensional objects in many colors. Some were cubes. Some were spheres. Some were complicated forms that twisted in ways that seemed impossible. The shapes moved slowly, rotating and changing position. This was a spatial reasoning test. The child needed to figure out how the shapes fit together to form a complete structure. It required understanding of geometry, pattern recognition, and the ability to think in 3 dimensions. Zentari. Children of similar development age usually completed this puzzle in 47 minutes. Verthelax expected Ellie to struggle for much longer, if she could solve it at all. The shapes want to be a house, Ellie said. Verthelax blinked. Centauri did not really blink, but he had learned the expression from other species. I am sorry? They want to be a house, Ellie repeated. She reached out with her small hands and began moving the shapes. See, this big one is lonely at the bottom. He wants friends on top of him. And these twisty ones are like the roof. They are showing off because they are pretty. Her hands moved quickly. The shapes clicked together. The puzzle was solved. Verthelax looked at his timer. 11 seconds had passed. Something very strange happened inside his crystal body. His secondary heart, which had beaten in perfect rhythm for 4 centuries, skipped. This had never happened before. Centauri did not experience surprise. Their minds were too orderly for such things. And yet, that was fun, Ellie said. Is there another one? Verthelax stared at her. He ran the timer through 3 different verification systems. All of them confirmed the same thing. 11 seconds. A puzzle that should have taken almost an hour had been solved in 11 seconds by a 7-year-old, human, with a stuffed rabbit. There must be an error, he said, more to himself than to the child. The puzzle was perhaps calibrated incorrectly. It was not wrong, Ellie said simply. The shapes told me what they wanted. I just listened. Verthelax did not understand what she meant. Shapes did not want things. Shapes did not tell anyone anything. Shapes were mathematical objects without consciousness or desire. But the puzzle was solved. That fact could not be denied. We will try another, he said. His voice was calm, but inside his crystal mind, something had begun to crack. A certainty he had carried for 400 years was developing small fractures. He told himself this was just a strange accident. Human children could not possibly be special. All the data, all the research, all the centuries of observation said otherwise. But as Ellie Chun swung her legs and hugged her rabbit and waited for the next puzzle with a smile on her small face, Professor Verthelax felt something he had never felt before. He felt unsure, and for a Centauri, that was the most impossible thing of all. Professor Verthelax needed to understand what had just happened. He was a scientist. He believed in facts and evidence and careful observation. What he had just witnessed did not match any fact he knew about human development, so he did what any good scientist would do. He tested again. The next puzzle will be more difficult, he told Ellie. Please do your best. Okay, she said cheerfully. She adjusted Mr. Whiskers on her lap so the stuffed rabbit could see the testing area. Mr. Whiskers wants to watch too. He likes puzzles almost as much as I do. Verthelax selected a pattern recognition matrix. This was not a test designed for children. It was designed for species with advanced mental abilities. The Crixful were a hive-minded species. This meant that many individuals shared one consciousness. They could think with thousands of brains at once. This test had been made for them. The average adult Crixful drone could complete this puzzle in 6 minutes. The holographic display filled with cascading lights. They were fractals, which meant patterns that repeated at every size. Inside the fractals were hidden sequences, numbers and shapes woven together in ways that required seeing many things at once. Finding the answer meant understanding how all the pieces connected across 4 different dimensions. Verthelax watched Ellie carefully. He expected confusion. He expected her to ask questions. He expected the small human brain to struggle with information it was never designed to process. Ellie tilted her head to one side. She began to hum a small song with no real tune. Her mother's file had mentioned this. Humans made sounds to comfort themselves when they were thinking hard. It is the Fibonacci thing, Ellie said after a moment. Verthelax felt his crystal structure vibrate. The Fibonacci sequence was indeed part of the pattern. but it had been hidden inside layers of complexity that should have taken hours to unwrap. But it is in 4 dimensions instead of 2, Ellie continued. She pointed at the cascading lights with one small finger. The pattern is growing outward and inward and sideways, and also in a direction I do not have a word for. The answer is the purple one that has not shown up yet. The holographic display flickered. Then it turned solid purple. Puzzle solved. Verthelax checked his timer. 34 seconds. His hands moved to the observation console in front of him. He gripped the edges. He gripped them hard. This was very unusual. Centauri did not grip things. Gripping was a behavior associated with species that experienced stress and anxiety. Centauri were above such primitive responses, and yet his fingers would not let go. Was that right? Ellie asked. She did not seem to understand that she had done something impossible. To her, this was just another game. Can we do another one? These are really fun. Fun. She thought this was fun. Verthelax had dedicated his entire life to understanding intelligence. He had written 300 academic papers on cognitive development across species. He'd been given awards by 17 different civilizations for his research, contributions to educational theory. And now a 7-year-old human girl with a stuffed rabbit was making him question everything he thought he knew. He needed guidance. Verthelax opened a secure communication channel to the Academy's High Council. These were the eldest and wisest minds in the entire educational system. They oversaw testing protocols across thousands of planets. They did not normally concern themselves with individual examinations, but this was not normal. I require authorization for Tier 7 assessment protocols, he transmitted. He tried to keep his thought patterns calm and professional. He was not entirely successful. Immediately, the response came faster than expected. The council had been monitoring his testing chamber. They had seen what Ellie did. They were just as confused as he was. Authorization granted, came the reply. Proceed with extreme caution. Document everything. Verthelax closed the channel. He looked at Ellie. She had pulled a small bag from somewhere in her dress. From this bag, she produced orange-colored sticks shaped like tiny fish. Do you want one? She asked, holding out the bag toward him. They are fish crackers. They are my favorite snack. Verthelax's sensors analyzed the food. It contained no fish. It contained no protein from any aquatic creature. It was mostly processed grain and artificial flavoring. He did not understand why it was called a fish cracker. No, thank you, he said. I do not eat solid food. That is sad, Ellie said with genuine sympathy. Fish crackers are really good. My dad says I could eat a whole ocean of them. She put a cracker in her mouth and chewed happily. Orange crumbs fell onto Mr. Whiskers. She brushed them off with careful fingers. Verthelax watched this small, strange creature. She was completely unaware of what was about to happen. The Tier 7 protocols were not meant for children. They were not even meant for most adults. They were designed to test the absolute limits of consciousness itself. He should stop. He should write his report and send her home. He should tell her mother that Ellie was a special child who would need special attention, but he could not stop. He had to understand. 400 years of certainty demanded answers. Ellie, he said slowly, the next test will be very different. It will be very hard. You may not be able to finish it. That is okay. Okay. There is no shame in not finishing. Ellie looked at him with her large, dark eyes. She smiled. My dad says there is no such thing as too hard. There is only not yet. Maybe I will finish it today. Maybe I will finish it tomorrow. But if it is a puzzle, I will finish it sometime. She ate another fish cracker. Okay, she said. I am ready. Berthelax was not sure anyone could ever be ready for what came next, but he activated Tier 7 anyway. The room began to change. The walls fell away into infinite darkness. The air filled with lights and shadows and things that had no names in any language. Mathematics became visible. Logic became touchable. The very nature of reality bent and twisted. Around them, Ellie's eyes went wide. But she did not look scared. She looked excited. Dot and Professor Berthelax, for the first time in his very long life, felt something very close to fear. Not fear of the test. Fear of what this small human girl might do to it. The Tier 7 assessment was never meant to be solved. This was not a secret. Everyone who knew about its existence understood this simple truth. The test was designed to measure how far a mind could go before it had to stop. It measured the distance a consciousness could travel into impossible territory before it admitted defeat. The most powerful artificial intelligences in the galaxy had attempted Tier 7. They had made progress. They had pushed through layer after layer of logical paradox. But eventually, even they had stopped. The test was simply too complex. It contained contradictions wrapped inside contradictions. It had mathematical problems that argued with themselves. It had philosophical questions with no right answers. Only less wrong ones doubt the eldest minds of the Verkith Collective. Beings who had been thinking for thousands of years had once attempted Tier 7 as a group. 17 of them had worked together for 6 months. They had completed 43% of the test before giving up. That was the record. 43%. Nobody had ever done better. Berthelax watched as the testing chamber transformed around them. The normal room disappeared. In its place grew something that was part maze, part equation, part dream. Shapes existed that should not exist. Colors appeared that had no names. Sounds could be seen. Thoughts could be touched. Ellie stood in the middle of it all. She was so small. Her blue dress and light-up shoes looked ridiculous against the infinite complexity surrounding her. Mr. Whiskers dangled from one hand, his button eyes reflecting impossibilities. "This is different," Ellie said. Her voice was quiet but not frightened. "Yes," Berthelax replied. He floated nearby, his crystal form casting strange shadows in the non-light of the test space. "This test has no expected completion time. You may stop whenever you wish. There is no failure in stopping." Ellie nodded slowly. She looked around at the madness of logic and unreason that surrounded them. Pathways led in directions that did not exist. Doors opened onto staircases that climbed downward into the sky. Numbers floated past like fish swimming through air. "It is like my dreams," she said softly. "But bigger." She took a bite of another fish cracker. She chewed thoughtfully. Then she turned to Mr. Whiskers and held him up so he could see everything too. "Okay, Mr. Whiskers," she said. "This one is tricky. We need to think together." Berthelax observed with scientific detachment. Or at least, he tried to. His secondary heart had still not returned to normal rhythm. Small cracks continued to spread through his centuries of certainty. Ellie began to walk. She did not walk in any logical direction. She wandered. She stopped to look at things. She touched floating symbols with her small fingers. She hummed her tuneless song, and she talked. She talked to Mr. Whiskers constantly. "See this part here?" she said, pointing at a knot of contradicting equations. "The numbers are fighting. This one says yes, and that one says no. They are both right, but they do not know it. They need to learn to share." She reached into the knot with both hands. She pulled the equations apart gently, like untangling hair. Then she pushed them back together in a different way. The knot dissolved into harmony. Berthelax checked his readings. She had just solved a paradox that had been debated by mathematicians for over 1,000 years. She had solved it in roughly 20 seconds by treating it like an argument between friends. "That is better," Ellie said with satisfaction. "Now they are happy." She moved on. The test shifted around her, presenting new challenges. Each one was more impossible than the last. Each one combined logic and philosophy and mathematics in ways that should have broken any mind attempting to understand them. Ellie did not try to understand them, not in the way Vuthelex understood understanding. She did not analyze. She did not calculate. She did not apply theories or frameworks or methodologies. She told stories. "This part is sad," she announced, looking at a section of the test that represented the fundamental loneliness of consciousness. Great philosophers had spent lifetimes contemplating this problem. They had written millions of words about the impossibility of truly knowing another mind. Ellie saw a sad thing that needed a friend. "You are not alone," she told the lonely equation. "You just think you are. But look, all these other numbers are thinking about you. That means they know you exist. And if they know you exist, then you are connected. Being thought about is the same as being hugged, just with brains instead of arms." The equation trembled. Then it transformed. The symbol for loneliness became the symbol for connection. A philosophical crisis that had troubled minds for centuries simply evaporated because a small girl had decided. It was sad and needed comfort. Vuthelex stopped trying to maintain scientific detachment. His crystal form was glowing brighter than it had in decades. His neural lattice was processing at maximum capacity, just trying to record what he was witnessing. "This is not possible," he whispered to himself. "This cannot be happening." But it was happening. Ellie continued through the test. She befriended angry contradictions. She comforted confused paradoxes. She told bedtime stories too. Mathematical concepts that had never known they wanted bedtime stories until she started telling them. Mr. Whiskers was consulted on every major decision. Vuthelex watched his timer. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. The percentage counter climbed. 40%. 43%. 45. 50. 60. She had passed the Verkith Collective's record in under 4 minutes. At 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The Tier 7 assessment did something it had never done before. It ended. Not because Ellie gave up. Not because she reached a point where she could go no further. It ended because there was nothing left. She had solved the unsolvable. She had finished the unfinishable. She had befriended every problem until none remained. The testing chamber returned to its normal state. Plain walls, simple floor, ordinary light. Ellie stood in the middle of the room, still holding Mr. Whiskers, still chewing on a fish cracker. "That was a good one," she said. "I liked the sad parts best because they were happy at the end." Vuthelex could not speak. His vocal systems had temporarily shut down from shock. He floated in place, his crystal form flickering with chaotic light as his mind tried and failed to process what had just occurred. The impossible test had been completed. By a child. In under 5 minutes, Vuthelex finally managed to find his voice. "I need to contact my physician," he said weakly, "and the High Council, and possibly every scientist in the galaxy." Ellie looked at him with concern. "Are you okay? You look like my goldfish when I forget to feed him." Kind of floaty and confused. Vuthelex had never seen a goldfish, but he suspected the comparison was accurate. "No," he admitted. "I am not okay. I do not think I have been okay since you walked through that door." Ellie nodded sympathetically. She walked over to him and held out her bag of crackers. "Fish crackers help when you feel bad," she said. "You should try one. Even if you do not eat solid food, sometimes you have to do new things." Vuthelex looked at the bag. He looked at the small human girl offering it. He looked at the stuffed rabbit that had somehow participated in solving the most difficult test in galactic history. He took a fish cracker dot. It tasted like nothing he had ever experienced. It was salty and crunchy, an entirely illogical dot. It was perfect. The Galactic Education Council had not called an emergency meeting in 3,000 years. The last time had been when the Void Singers discovered a new form of mathematics that existed only in dreams. That had been considered very important at the time. This was more important. 17 species sent their representatives to the virtual gathering. Some appeared as holograms. Some existed only as patterns of thought projected into shared space. Some were so ancient and strange that they could not be properly seen, only sensed. Professor Verthelax stood before them all. Or rather, he floated. His crystal form still flickered with unstable light. He had not fully recovered from what he had witnessed. He wondered if he ever would. "Show us the recordings," demanded High Arbiter Zindai of the crystalline hegemony. She was a distant relative of Verthelax, though much older and much more powerful. Her form was nearly pure light, held together by will and mathematics. "We must see this for ourselves." Verthelax transmitted the complete testing record. The council watched in silence as a small human girl in a blue dress solved puzzle after puzzle. They saw her talk to her stuffed rabbit. They saw her eat fish crackers. They saw her befriend mathematical concepts and comfort lonely equations. They saw her complete the Tier 7 assessment in 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The silence that followed was very deep. It was the kind of silence that happens when something believed to be impossible has been proven wrong. "This must be fraud," Zindai finally said. Her voice was sharp with denial. "The humans have somehow stolen our testing algorithms. They have prepared this child in advance. It is the only explanation." "I considered that possibility," Verthelax replied. "So I administered 16 additional examinations. Each one was generated in real time using quantum randomization. No one could have known what the tests would be, not even me. I did not decide until the moment I created them." "And?" asked the thought pattern representing the machine collective. "She completed all 16 tests. Her success rate was 100%. Her average completion time was 31 seconds. More silence. "Describe her methodology," commanded Elder Crixmuth, speaking for the hive-minded species. The Elder's voice was actually thousands of voices layered together. It created a sound like wind through autumn leaves. Verthelax struggled to find the right words. "She does not have a methodology. Not in any way we would recognize. She does not analyze problems. She does not apply theoretical frameworks. She does not calculate or compute or deduce. Then, what does she do?" Verthelax thought about the small girl and her stuffed rabbit. He thought about fish crackers and tuneless humming. He thought about the way she had looked at impossible contradictions and seen only friends waiting to be made. "She tells stories," he said at last. "She anthropomorphizes abstract concepts. She assigns emotional narratives to mathematical relationships. She treats puzzles not as problems to be solved, but as beings to be understood. She does not solve puzzles. She befriends them." The council members exchanged confused glances and thought patterns in quantum fluctuations. "That is absurd," Zindai declared. "Intelligence is about processing speed. It is about logical analysis. It is about systematic breakdown of complex problems into simpler components. What you are describing is not intelligence. It is imagination. It is play." "Yes," Verthelax agreed quietly. "That is exactly what it is." Elder Crixmuth spoke again. The many voices were thoughtful now, considering something deeply. "We have analyzed human cognitive development extensively. Our hive has observed them since first contact. Their young are born more helpless than almost any other species. They cannot walk. They cannot feed themselves. They cannot even focus their eyes properly. This supports my position, Zindai interrupted. They are developmentally inferior. Let me finish, the elder said with gentle authority. Their helplessness forces their brains to develop differently. Where we inherit knowledge genetically, they must learn everything from nothing. Where you grow with crystal uncertainty, they grow through constant uncertainty. And because they start with nothing, their neural pathways develop a plasticity that is unmatched in known biology. Meaning what exactly? Meaning they learn through play. They treat reality itself as a puzzle to be manipulated. They do not accept the rules of any system as fixed. They bend and break and remake rules until the system does what they want. The elder paused. The child did not solve the Tier 7 assessment. She rewrote it. She transformed contradictions into harmonies because in her mind, there was no rule saying contradictions must remain contradictory. The council fell silent again as they absorbed this idea. A very old being who rarely spoke made itself known. It had no name that could be pronounced. It was ancient when the first stars formed. It observed more than it participated. But now it had something to say. We have made an error, it communicated. The words appeared directly in everyone's consciousness. For millions of years, we have measured intelligence by speed and complexity and logical rigor. We have valued minds that think like machines. But machines cannot do what this child does. Machines cannot befriend a paradox. Machines cannot comfort a lonely equation. Machines cannot tell stories to mathematics until mathematics changes to fit the story. What are you suggesting? Zindai asked. Her voice had lost some of its sharpness. I am suggesting that we have fundamentally misunderstood what intelligence is. We have been measuring the wrong things. Speed is not wisdom. Complexity is not understanding. Logic is not creativity. The ancient being paused. This child connects to problems in ways we never considered possible. She does not defeat puzzles. She makes peace with them. She does not conquer contradictions. She helps them find harmony. This is not inferior intelligence. This may be the highest form of intelligence in the universe. Professor Varthalax felt something shift inside his crystal structure. The cracks that had formed in his certainty were spreading. But now they did not feel like damage. They felt like growth. They felt like making room for new ideas. Are you saying, he asked slowly, that human children are cognitively superior to us? The ancient being seemed to smile, though it had no face. I am saying that human children see puzzles as friends they have not made yet. And perhaps that is what puzzles always wanted to be. The council had no response to that dot far away. In a small apartment on Consortium Hub 7, Ellie Chun was eating dinner with her parents. She was telling them about her day. She described the nice crystal professor and the fun puzzles and the way the testing room had turned into a dream. And I made friends with all the sad numbers, she explained between bites of pasta. They were confused because nobody had ever been nice to them before. But I told them they were not alone. And then they were happy. Her parents exchanged a look over her head. They had received a very unusual message from the Galactic Academy. It was very long and used many complicated words. But the basic message was simple. Their daughter had done something impossible, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what it meant. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, her mother said, smiling. Are you going back tomorrow? Ellie nodded enthusiastically. The professor said there are more puzzles. He looked really confused but also excited. Like when Mr. Whiskers discovers a new corner of the apartment. She held up her stuffed rabbit. Mr. Whiskers thinks the professor is nice. He just needs more fish crackers. Her parents laughed. They had no idea that their daughter had just rewritten everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligence, and Ellie had no idea either. To her, it had just been a fun day of making friends. 3 years had passed since the day Ellie Chun walked into Professor Vothelak's testing chamber and changed everything. The Galactic Academy looked different now. The hallways that had once been quiet and orderly were filled with new sounds. Laughter echoed off the crystal walls. Arguments about imaginary stories mixed with discussions of quantum physics. The smell of various alien snacks drifted through the air, along with the very specific crunch of fish crackers. Professor Vothelak stood at the entrance to his classroom. He still floated slightly above the ground, as all Zentari did. His crystal form still glowed with the light of his thoughts. But something about him had changed. The rigid perfection of his structure had softened somehow. Small imperfections had appeared in his crystal lattice. Other Zentari might have seen this as damage. Vothelak saw it as growth. His classroom was waiting. It was the first truly integrated cohort in the Academy's long history. In the front row sat 3 Zentari younglings. Their crystal forms flickered nervously. They had been taught their whole lives that they were the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. Now they were being asked to learn alongside creatures they had once considered inferior. Behind them sat a cluster of Crixful drones. They communicated with each other constantly, their hive mind buzzing with shared thoughts. They had never studied as individuals before. The concept made them uncomfortable and excited at the same time. In the corner sat representatives of species so new to space travel that they did not have names yet in the common tongue. They watched everything with wide eyes, taking in knowledge like plants drinking sunlight. And scattered throughout the room. In no particular arrangement were the human children. They were not sitting quietly at their desks. One was drawing pictures on a tablet. Another was building something out of small blocks. A third was having what appeared to be a serious conversation with a potted plant. In the middle of it all sat Ellie Chun. She was 10 years old now. She had grown taller, but not much. Her dark hair was longer, tied back in a messy ponytail. She still wore light-up shoes, though these were a newer model that flashed in rainbow patterns. Mr. Whiskers sat on her desk, slightly more worn than before, but still an essential companion. Ellie had been given a special title at the Academy. She was a junior teaching assistant. This position had not existed before her. No one had ever needed it. But after what she had demonstrated, the council had decided that perhaps human children could teach as well as learn. Vothelak cleared his throat. The room gradually fell quiet. Even the human child talking to the plant stopped mid-sentence. "Good morning, students," Vothelak said. "Today we begin a new unit. We will be working on collaborative problem solving. This means you will work together, in groups, to solve challenges." A Zentari youngling raised a crystalline hand. "Professor, will we be graded individually? I do not wish my performance to be affected by the slower processing speeds of other species." This was exactly the kind of thinking Vothelak had once shared. Now it made him feel something unfamiliar. He thought it might be sadness. "There will be no individual grades," he replied. "The group succeeds or fails together. More importantly, the goal is not to solve the problem quickly. The goal is to understand the problem deeply." These are not the same thing. The youngling looked confused. But speed of solution is the primary metric of intelligence. Ellie raised her hand. Vothelak nodded to her. "That is what everyone used to think," she said. Her voice was still high and clear, but there was more confidence in it now. But it is not true. Being smart is not about being fast. Being smart is about seeing things in new ways. Sometimes the slowest person in the room sees something nobody else can see. That makes them the smartest person for that moment. The Zentari youngling processed this. "I do not understand. Ellie smiled. That is okay. Understanding comes later. First comes confusion. Confusion is your brain making room for new ideas. Verthalax felt a warm glow spread through his crystal lattice. 3 years ago, he would not have believed such a statement. Now he knew it was true. He had experienced it himself. Let us begin, he said. Form groups of 5. Each group must contain at least 3 different species. The room dissolved into chaos. The human children immediately began talking to everyone. The Krixvold drones huddled together nervously before one brave individual broke away to join a mixed group. The Zentari younglings stood stiffly, clearly uncertain how to proceed. Ellie moved through the room like a small tornado of social connection. She introduced herself to everyone. She pulled shy creatures into groups. She helped translate between species who did not share a common language. She gave fish crackers to anyone who looked stressed. Within 10 minutes, every student was in a group. Every group was mixed. Every face showed some combination of nervousness and excitement. Verthalax activated the first problem. It appeared in the air above each group as a holographic tangle of mathematics and philosophy and art. It was not meant to be solved quickly. It was meant to be explored. You have 2 hours, he said. Remember, the goal is not to finish. The goal is to understand. The groups began to work. Verthalax floated between them, observing. What he saw filled him with wonder. A Zentari youngling was explaining fractals to a human child. But the human child was explaining what the fractals felt like. Together, they were building an understanding neither could have reached alone. A Krixvold drone was learning to think as an individual. A human was helping it, asking it what it thought, not what the hive thought. The drone's answers were uncertain and stumbling, but they were its own dot in Ellie's group. Something remarkable was happening. They were not solving the problem. They were having a conversation with it. They were asking the mathematical tangle what it wanted to be when it grew up. The tangle seemed to appreciate being asked. Verthalax stopped beside a young creature from one of the new species. It looked frightened. Its eyes were very large, and its body was trembling. Are you all right? Verthalax asked gently. I do not belong here, the creature whispered. I am not smart enough. Everyone else knows so much. I know nothing. Before Verthalax could respond, a human child from the same group turned around. He was a small boy with curly hair and paint on his fingers. That is not true, the boy said simply. You belong here because you are here. And you are smart because you asked that question. Dumb creatures do not worry about being dumb. Smart creatures worry all the time. That is how you know you are smart. The frightened creature blinked. Really? Really? Now come help us. We are trying to figure out what color this equation wants to be. I think it wants to be yellow, but Marcus thinks it wants to be blue. We need a tiebreaker. The creature hesitated. Then it moved closer to the group. I think it wants to be green, it said quietly. Because green is the color of growing things. And equations grow when you solve them. The human boy grinned. That is perfect, see? You are already helping. Verthalax watched this exchange. He thought about everything he had believed for 400 years. He thought about speed and complexity and logical rigor. He thought about all the ways the galaxy had measured intelligence. They had been measuring the wrong things. He looked at the new motto carved above the classroom door. It had been placed there by order of the High Council after months of debate. It was written in the old language of the Zentari, but it had been suggested by a human child. Intelligence is not speed. Intelligence is connection. Verthalax had not fully understood those words when they were first spoken. He understood them now. He watched his students work. He watched them struggle and argue and laugh and fail and try again. He watched a Zentari youngling share a fish cracker with a Krixvold drone. He watched Ellie. Chun explained to a mathematical concept that it did not need to be afraid of being solved, because solving was just another word for being understood. The universe was vast and cold and full of mysteries. For millions of years, civilizations had tried to conquer those mysteries with pure intellect. They had built machines and theories and systems of logic. They had measured and calculated and analyzed. But perhaps what the mysteries had wanted all along was not to be conquered. Perhaps they had just wanted to be understood. Perhaps they had just wanted a friend. Berthelac smiled. It was not a Centauri expression. He had learned it from watching humans. It felt strange on his crystal face. It felt good. The universe was not a puzzle to be solved, that it was a story waiting to be told. And these children, this beautiful chaotic mix of species and minds and perspectives, were going to tell it together, all because one small girl had walked into a testing room with a stuffed rabbit and decided that numbers could be lonely and equations could be sad and contradictions could learn to be friends. Berthelac had been a teacher for 400 years. He had never been so excited to learn.